NewsRadio. The narrative kicks off with WNYX thrown into a strange mix of anticipation and dread when Dave Nelson learns that a high-level corporate executive from Jimmy James's media empire will be visiting the station for an informal evaluation. A visit that is supposedly low stakes, but immediately sends Dave into full panic mode because in his experience informal always translates to secretly critical and potentially career-ending, and as he scrambles to prepare the office for inspection, the rest of the staff reacts in wildly different ways that reflect their personalities and insecurities. Lisa sees the visit as a strategic opportunity to demonstrate competence and possibly elevate her standing within the company hierarchy. Joe dismisses the entire thing as corporate theater and refuses to change anything about his behavior or workspace. Bill becomes convinced that the executive is actually an undercover agent sent to expose corruption or ideological bias in the media. Catherine treats the situation like a performance challenge and begins planning how to present the station in the most theatrically compelling way possible, and Matthew, as usual, gets caught in the crossfire of everyone else's agendas while trying desperately not to mess anything up. Dave's preparation efforts quickly spiral into obsession as he begins micromanaging every detail of the office environment, from rearranging furniture to scripting how employees should greet the executive. And this attempt to impose order on a fundamentally chaotic workplace only amplifies the tension because the staff is either unwilling or unable to conform to his expectations, leading to a series of comedic clashes where Dave's instructions are misunderstood, ignored, or actively subverted, particularly by Joe, who takes a kind of rebellious pride in doing the exact opposite of what Dave asks under the guise of maintaining authenticity. And Lisa, who initially supports Dave's plans, starts to question whether over-preparing might actually make them seem less genuine, creating a subtle rift between them as they debate the best approach to impressing the visitor. Meanwhile, Jimmy James, whose presence looms over the entire situation, offers little practical guidance and instead provides cryptic, philosophical commentary about the nature of evaluation and success, suggesting that the executive's opinion may matter less than how the station perceives itself. A perspective that only frustrates Dave further because it adds another layer of ambiguity to an already stressful situation. While Bill's paranoia escalates into a full-blown investigation as he begins gathering evidence of potential conspiracies within the company, roping Matthew into his theories and assigning him absurd tasks that Matthew follows with anxious dedication despite not understanding their purpose. As the day of the visit arrives, the station is in a state of barely controlled chaos, with everyone attempting in their own way to present a version of themselves that they think will be favorably received. But these performances quickly unravel when the executive turns out to be far less predictable than expected, asking unconventional questions and showing interest in the station's quirks rather than its efficiency, which throws Dave completely off balance because none of his carefully prepared responses seem relevant. And instead of showcasing professionalism, the staff ends up revealing their true selves through a series of unfiltered interactions that are equal parts embarrassing and oddly endearing. Catherine's theatrical approach unexpectedly resonates with the executive, who interprets her exaggerated behavior as a bold creative direction, while Joe's refusal to conform is seen as a sign of integrity and confidence. Bill's conspiracy-laden commentary is dismissed as eccentric but memorable, and Matthew's nervous sincerity becomes one of the most relatable aspects of the visit, creating a situation where the very traits Dave tried to suppress end up being the ones that make the station stand out throughout the episode. Dave struggles to reconcile his desire for control with the reality that WNYX's strength lies in its unpredictability, and this internal conflict reaches its peak when he finally abandons his scripted approach and starts speaking honestly with the executive, acknowledging the station's flaws while also defending its unique dynamic. A moment that feels like a turning point, not because it guarantees success, but because it represents a shift in Dave's understanding of leadership, moving away from rigid management toward a more adaptive, self-aware style. The executive's final assessment remains deliberately ambiguous, offering praise for the station's originality while also hinting at areas for improvement, leaving Dave both relieved and unsettled because he cannot fully determine whether the visit was a success or a warning. And this ambiguity becomes a central theme of the episode, reflecting the broader uncertainty that defines the characters' professional lives. In the aftermath of the visit, the staff gradually returns to their normal routines, but the experience leaves subtle traces in their interactions. As Lisa becomes slightly more open to unconventional approaches, Joe gains a quiet sense of validation without changing his outward attitude. Bill continues to spin his theories, but with a hint of satisfaction that he may have been partially right about hidden agendas. Catherine embraces her role as both performer and commentator, and Matthew carries forward a small boost in confidence from having navigated the situation without completely falling apart, while Dave, reflecting on the day's events, comes to a quiet realization that trying to force the station into a traditional mold will never work, and that his role is not to eliminate chaos, but to channel it in a way that allows the team to function without losing what makes them unique. The episode closes on a characteristically understated note, with Dave observing the newsroom as it settles back into its familiar rhythm, recognizing that while nothing has fundamentally changed, his perspective has shifted just enough to alter how he approaches his role moving forward. And this balance between continuity and subtle growth encapsulates the essence of the series, delivering a story that blends sharp humor with thoughtful insight into the complexities of workplace dynamics, identity, and the challenge of finding stability in an environment defined by constant unpredictability, ultimately reinforcing the idea that success at WNYX cannot be measured by conventional standards, but must be understood through the lens of its distinctive, chaotic, and deeply human ecosystem where imperfection is not just inevitable but essential to its identity. And as the tension from the executive's visit continues to linger in the air long after the official evaluation has ended, the episode subtly shifts from external pressure to internal reflection, allowing each character to process what happened in their own uniquely offbeat way. And what makes this stretch of the story especially compelling is how it refuses to give a clean resolution, instead leaning into the ambiguity that has been building from the beginning because Dave, despite receiving no clear negative feedback, cannot shake the feeling that he has somehow failed to fully represent the station in a way that satisfies both corporate expectations and his own sense of responsibility. And this quiet anxiety manifests in small, almost obsessive behaviors, like revisiting conversations in his head, reinterpreting the executive's neutral comments as hidden critiques, and even attempting to reconstruct moments of the visit with the team to analyze what could have gone differently. Which of course only confuses everyone else because from their perspective the day went relatively fine, or at least no worse than any other chaotic day at WNYX. Lisa, picking up on Dave's spiraling mindset, tries to ground him with a more pragmatic perspective, pointing out that the executive's reaction was not only acceptable but possibly even positive given the station's unconventional nature. Yet even she finds herself second-guessing her own performance, wondering if her attempt to appear polished might have come across as less authentic compared to the others. And this leads to an interesting dynamic where both she and Dave are grappling with different sides of the same issue. He worries about not being structured enough while she worries about being destructured. And their conversations reflect a growing awareness that there is no perfect balance between professionalism and individuality in a place like WNYX. Joe, meanwhile, remains outwardly indifferent but reveals through subtle actions that the visit did affect him more than he lets on, particularly in how he becomes slightly more attentive to the functionality of the station's equipment without making a big deal about it. as if he has quietly decided that maintaining a certain level of operational reliability is his own way of contributing to the station's image without compromising his anti-authority stance, and this understated shift highlights one of the episode's key themes. That growth at WNYX often happens beneath the surface rather than through overt declarations. Bill continues to reinterpret the entire event through his conspiracy-driven worldview, insisting that the executive's vague feedback is proof of a larger hidden agenda within the company. But there are moments where his usual confidence falters, particularly when he briefly considers the possibility that the visit was exactly what it appeared to be, a routine evaluation with no deeper meaning, and that uncertainty unsettles him more than any conspiracy ever could because it removes the narrative framework he relies on to make sense of the world, leading him to double down on his theories even as they become increasingly elaborate and self-contradictory. Catherine, ever the performer, treats the aftermath as an extension of the show she has been putting on, continuing to experiment with how she presents herself both on and off the air. But there are glimpses of genuine curiosity in her behavior as she tests the boundaries between authenticity and performance, particularly when she engages in a more subdued, less exaggerated conversation with Lisa that hints at a deeper awareness of how she is perceived and how much control she actually has over that perception. Matthew, perhaps the most quietly affected by the entire experience, reflects on his interactions with the executive and realizes that his nervous honesty may have been more effective than he initially thought, which gives him a small but meaningful boost in self-confidence, and this is reflected in how he carries himself in the final stretch of the episode. Still anxious but slightly more grounded, as if he has internalized the idea that he doesn't need to overcompensate to be valued. As these individual threads continue to unfold, Dave eventually reaches a point where he recognizes that his need for a definitive answer about the success or failure of the visit is itself part of the problem, because it prevents him from appreciating the more nuanced reality of what happened, and in a quiet, almost understated turning point, he decides to let go of the need for certainty, accepting that ambiguity is an inherent part of both leadership and the environment he is working in. And this shift is not marked by any grand speech or dramatic gesture, but rather by a subtle change in how he interacts with the team, becoming slightly less rigid, slightly more open to the unpredictable flow of the newsroom. The episode's closing moments reinforce this sense of quiet evolution as the staff settles back into their usual dynamic, but with just enough variation to suggest that the experience has left its mark, like a conversation that lingers in the background of their interactions even when it is no longer being actively discussed. And Dave, observing this from his office or the edge of the newsroom floor, seems more at ease with the chaos than he was at the beginning of the episode. Not because it has become any less chaotic, but because he has adjusted his expectations, recognizing that success at WNYX is not about achieving a fixed standard, but about navigating an ever-shifting landscape of personalities, pressures, and possibilities, and in this way the episode extends its themes beyond the immediate storyline, offering a broader reflection on the nature of work, identity, and the often uncomfortable space between who we are and who we think we are supposed to be, all while maintaining the sharp humor and character-driven energy that define the series, ultimately leaving the audience with a sense that while nothing has been definitively resolved, something important has nonetheless changed beneath the surface, and that this kind of subtle, ongoing transformation is what keeps the world of news radio feeling both chaotic and deeply alive at the same time.